Okay, today we'll start the next portion of the first unit, uh, consumer behavior. Okay, in this portion, we will see how a typical consumer behaves for different price scenario, and what will be the amount of consumption of the commodities for a consumer. So there are two different approaches in your syllabus. Uh, One is called Cardinal Utility Approach, which we will study today, and the other is Ordinal Utility Approach. So first, we will start this Cardinal Utility Approach of consumer behavior. So what is Cardinal Utility Approach? Basically, in Cardinal Utility Approach, we assume that the consumer can quantitatively measure utility. What is utility? Utility is something, say, some amount of satisfaction that a consumer receives if he or she consumes a particular commodity or a service. Say, for example, if you eat say, for example, samosa, you will get some amount of satisfaction. That is why you consume a samosa. So whatever satisfaction you are receiving, that we call utility of having a samosa. Now, if we can measure the value of utility, say from one samosa, the utility is 5 unit. So if I can say that if you consume one samosa, you will get a utility of 5 unit. So, or say if you drink a bottle of cold drinks, then you get say amount of utility is say 20 unit. So basically, if we can quantify the amount of utility, then we are following this cardinal utility approach, or we also call it Marshallian approach. Now, what is total utility? Say if you consume, say, for example, in total 5 samosas, after consumption of 5 samosas, whatever utility you have received from consuming 5 samosas, we call it total utility. Next concept is something called marginal utility. Marginal utility means after consuming, say, some amount of samosa, say you had already had 2 samosa or 3 samosa or 4 samosa, now you are having 1 extra unit of samosa. From this 1 extra additional unit of samosa, whatever amount of utility you are getting, this is called marginal utility from the samosa. Is this concept clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir, once more explain marginal utility.
Yeah, I'm coming. Say, if you had, say, from 1 samosa, the amount of utility you are getting is, say, 5 unit. This is amount of utility, and we call it total utility. And here, let us write marginal utility. Okay. Say if from the second unit, if you get, say, 4 unit of utility, so the marginal utility from consumption of the second unit, you already had 1 unit, first unit of samosa, from which you got this 5 unit of utility. So there is no marginal utilities. So because earlier you had nothing. So from consuming one unit of samosa, the total utility will be exactly 5. Now you are having the second unit. So earlier you had already had 1 unit. Next, for the next unit, the amount of utility you are getting, say for example 4. So the marginal utility is extra addition of utility, which is 4. And what is the total utility? Total utility is this marginal utility plus the total utility from the all previous consumption. So here the total utility from having 2 samosas will be 5 plus this 4, which will be equal to 9. Now, say for example, you had third samosa. So for that you receive marginal utility of say 3 unit. So now your total utility, what will the value of total utility after having 3 units of samosa? So 5
12.
plus 9, that is 14. For 14 plus this extra additional utility from consumption of the third unit of samosa. So kitna hua? So 14 plus 3, this will be 17. Okay. Now say if you had fourth samosa, say utility becomes 0, the marginal utility. So what will the value of total utility? How much?
31.
You add all these 3.
Sir.
5 plus 4, 9. 9 plus 9 plus 3. It will be 12, not 17. So 12 plus 0, it will be 0 total utility. Now say if you
26,
had
sir.
not 26, so it will be 12 plus 0. So 5 for fifth unit, say marginal utility is, say for example, negative -2. That means if you consume this fifth samosa, this will create some health trouble to you, that creates some marginal dissatisfaction or discomfort. Say for that discomfort, this is amount of discomfort is say -2 unit. Then your total utility will be this total utility plus this marginal utility, which will be equal to 10. Fine.
Yes, sir.
So if you draw these numbers in a graph, so you can see that the value marginal utility is falling continuously as you are increasing the consumption of the commodity. So the marginal utility curve will be a downward sloping curve, and it goes beyond the horizontal axis. So here we are measuring amount of output, and here marginal utility. Okay. So as we are consuming more and more of the same commodity, the amount of utility you are deriving from 1 unit extra consumption of the commodity is falling continuously. So the vertical distance is basically giving you the amount of marginal utility. So for this unit, the value of marginal utility will be this distance. What about total utility? Total utility, you can see the total utility is increasing continuously up to this point. Say here up to unit 4. So you can say this is 4th unit of samosa. So up to this point, marginal utility will continuously increases. It increases at a decreasing rate up to this point, and after that it starts to fall like this, but it will never be zero. Fine.
Yes, sir.
So this is how it looks. So total utility curve will look like this. It will increase at a decreasing rate, because why decreasing rate? Because as we are consuming more and more amount of the commodity, or as we are moving rightward like this, in this way, so the marginal utility of the commodity will be falling continuously. So total utility is nothing but utility, total utility is nothing but utility from the first unit plus the marginal utility of the second unit plus the marginal utility of the third unit, and so on. Now, as this marginal utility mu2 compared to mu2, mu2 will be, if mu3 will be even smaller, mu4 will be even smaller, and so on. So the amount of total utility, it will be increasing, but it increases at a decreasing rate. Is this concept is clear?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain it with some more other example? Anyone? Do you watch cricket?
Yes, sir.
So use that as an example. Say, for example, after 5 overs, total run is, say, 50. Okay. Now in 6, so per over average kitna hoga? 10 per over run rate. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
So if in 6th over, if India scores, say, 5 runs, then what will be the total amount of run after 60 over? It will be 55. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what will be the run rate after 6 overs? 55 by divided by 6, kitna hoga? 9 point something. Like so. Hello.
এইখানটা বুঝলাম না, আরেকবার বলবেন একটু?
What I'm saying that, say in 5 overs, first 5 overs, India scores, say, 50 runs in a cricket match. So what is India's run rate for first 5 overs? 10 per over.
Yes, sir.
Now I'm saying that in 6th overs, India scored only 5 runs. So after 6 overs, total run scored by India is 50 plus this 5. So total run is 55.
Yes, sir.
So this is nothing but, this 5 is nothing but your marginal utility. So the extra runs scored in the additional over, the 6th over. So 6th over a marginal run কত হয়েছে? 5 run.
Yeah.
So the total run after 6th over is 55. Now run rate কত হবে in 6 over?
9.16 মানে
9 point something.
হ্যাঁ
তাই তো?
হ্যাঁ
তাহলে
স্যার
5 ওভারের জন্য রান রেট কত ছিল? 10 ছিল। নাও 6 ওভারের পর রান রেট কত হলো? 9 হয়ে গেল। তারপর ধরো 7th ওভারে গিয়ে যদি রান করে 3 রান করে, তাহলে ইন্ডিয়ার টোটাল রান কত হলো আফটার 7 ওভার্স? 58, তাই তো?
ইয়েস স্যার
55 + 3। সো তখন এই থ্রিটা হয়ে যাবে মার্জিনাল রানস ইন 7th ওভার, and this is 55 is total score or total run in 7 overs. সো এবার রান রেটটা কত করে হচ্ছে? রান রেটটা ভাগ করো, এটাকে 7 দিয়ে ভাগ করলে কত আসে?
8.29
8.29. Now you can see that this 10-9, that ইন্ডিয়ার স্কোরটা কিন্তু আস্তে আস্তে বাড়ছে। 50 ছিল, টোটাল স্কোর 55 হয়ে গেল, তারপর 58 হয়ে গেল, কিন্তু অ্যাভারেজটা আস্তে আস্তে কমে যাচ্ছে। এটাই হচ্ছে এখানে তোমার ইন্ডিয়ার রানটা কিন্তু বাড়ছে, কিন্তু সেটা ইনক্রিজেস অ্যাট আ ডিক্রিজিং রেট। আর এই নেগেটিভ পোর্শনটা দেখানো যাবে না, কারণ রান কখনোই নেগেটিভ রান হতে পারে না। তাহলে এই পোর্শনটা আমি দেখাতে পারবো না আর কি, মানে এক্সপ্লেন করতে পারবো না। ঠিক আছে?
ইয়েস
বোঝা গেছে? পরিষ্কার?
হ্যাঁ স্যার বুঝেছি
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
বাকিরা মৌন? নো ওয়ার্ডস? Okay, so now we have some assumptions of this model. So first assumption, as I already said, that utility is cardinally measurable. That means we can actually measure the amount of satisfaction. If, say, for example, we can say that if the consumer, one particular consumer consumes one amount of samosa, the amount of utility will be exactly 5 units. Or we can all say that if the consumer drinks a bottle of cold drinks, his or her amount of utility will be exactly 20 units. So we can say that from these 20 units, as we know that 20 is higher than 5, so we can also say that the consumers gets more satisfaction from consuming a cold drinks than consuming a samosa. Clear?
ইয়েস স্যার
Now, when we talk about this ordinal utility approach, what we will do in the next class, then we cannot actually measure the exact amount of utility. But we can say, in case of ordinal utility approach, we can say that utility from cold drinks will be higher than utility from a samosa. Okay. This much we can say. Now we can see the difference between these two. Here we can exactly quantify the exact amount of utility, but here in case of ordinal approach, we cannot quantify it exactly, but we can order the two commodities. So we can say that cold drink will give more utility than a samosa, but we don't know what will be the utility from cold drink or what will be the utility from samosa. But we know that consuming a pizza gives me better utility than a paratha, like this. বোঝা গেল দুটোর মধ্যে ডিফারেন্স?
হ্যাঁ স্যার
Next is marginal utility of money is constant. Okay, what is marginal utility of money? Can anyone tell me?
স্যার মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি অফ মানি মানেটা
সেটাই জিজ্ঞেস করছি।
So the difference between the two successive amount we are spending.
Marginal utility টা কি বুঝলে বলো? Marginal utility of a commodity we just taught.
Yes, so the marginal utility of a commodity is means after successive whenever we are spending something successively, the difference between the next one with the previous one, the difference which we are getting, that is the marginal one, means it is decreasing. Our total is increasing, our and the average is means the difference means one after another our satisfaction is also decreasing after consuming the same thing. The difference is the marginal.
কিসের ডিফারেন্স?
Sir,
ডিফারেন্স
the
অফ হোয়াট?
commodity which we are consuming, like you said, so said about samosa, or in the over rate, the run rate, the differences are decreasing one after another,
No,
means after successive consumption
no,
of that.
what I said that if you consume marginal utility of a commodity, ঠিক আছে?
Yes sir.
Say if you consume, say for example, samosa, say
Yes,
from extra 1 unit of samosa, how
yes sir,
much
that additional unit of,
that additional unit of utility kitna mil raha hai, that is
yes
your
sir,
marginal utility of
marginal, yes
a commodity.
yes
Now
sir, the
I'm
additional one, yes sir, the additional one which we are getting, that is
not additional one, the additional utility,
the additional
additional
utility. Yes.
utility or additional satisfaction that we are getting from consumption of one additional or one extra unit of that commodity or service.
Yes sir.
अगर हम किसी चीज का मतलब एक्स्ट्रा 1 यूनिट कंजम्पशन करने के लिए मतलब करने से कितना एक्स्ट्रा सेटिस्फैक्शन और यूटिलिटी मिल रहा है, दैट इज कॉल्ड मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी. एंड दोज हु कैन अंडरस्टैंड बेंगली, কোন জিনিসের 1 ইউনিট এক্সট্রা কনজাম্পশন করে আমরা যতটা ইউটিলিটি এক্সট্রা পাই সেটাকেই আমরা বলছি মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি অফ দ্যাট কমোডিটি. ঠিক আছে? Now I am asking that what will be the marginal utility of money?
Sir, marginal utility of money নিশ্চয়ই বেশি হবে ইনফিনিটি।
বেশি কমের কথা হচ্ছে না, আমি প্রথমে জিজ্ঞেস করছি জিনিসটা কি, খায় না মাথায় আমাকে।
খরচ করে টাকা।
স্যার যে অ্যাডিশনাল মানি আমরা যে আফটার মানে প্রিভিয়াস যে অ্যামাউন্টটা স্পেন্ড করেছি, তারপরে যে একটা অ্যাডিশনাল যে আমরা মানি স্পেন্ড করছি, ওই অ্যাডিশনালটা আমাদের মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি অফ মানি with respect to the previous one which we have spent.
No, we are not spending anything. Say for example, in your pocket you have 100 rupees.
Yes.
जेब में अगर 100 रुपए है तो तुम्हें कुछ सेटिस्फैक्शन मिलता है, ठीक है? So if this is your amount of money, so
yes sir, और अगर मान लीजिए 110 रुपया अगर हमारे पास होता है, तो फिर वो जो 10 रुपीज जो एडिशनल हमको मिल रहा है, वो 100 रुपीज के कंपेयर में हमको एक एडिशनल सेटिस्फैक्शन देता है, मतलब ये देता है, वो मार्जिनल देता है उस 100 के कंपेयर में.
now let me finish. So you got some total utility is, say for example 500 unit of utility. This is your amount of satisfaction if you have 100 rupees in your pocket. Now you are getting 1 rupee extra. Say your friend gave you 1 rupee extra, so now you have 101 rupee in your pocket. So due to that, say you have say 500 and say 5 unit of utility. So this 5 unit extra utility you are receiving from having 1 unit extra amount of rupee in your pocket. Is this clear?
Yes sir.
Yes sir.
So this is called marginal utility of money. তার মানে আমার কাছে যদি এক্সট্রা 1 টাকা আসে, তার দরুন আমার স্যাটিসফ্যাকশনটা কতটা চেঞ্জ হবে, দ্যাট ইজ কল্ড মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি অফ মানি. ফাইন?
Yes sir.
Now, what we are saying, marginal utility of money is constant. What does it mean?
সেম থাকবে।
কার সাথে সেম থাকবে?
Means sir,
মানে স্যার স্থির থাকবে ওটা ইউটিলিটিটা।
কিভাবে স্থির থাকবে?
স্যার কোনো এক্সট্রা স্যাটিসফ্যাকশন পাচ্ছি না, ওটা এবার মানে হল্ট হয়ে গেছে, মানে যে স্যাটিসফ্যাকশনটা পাচ্ছি
স্যাটিসফ্যাকশন
ওটা
পাচ্ছি, এতে 5 ইউনিট স্যাটিসফ্যাকশন বেড়ে গেছে।
আপনি বললেন স্যার মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি ইজ কনস্ট্যান্ট বললেন না?
মিউট করো, কি ঠকঠক করছো? So marginal utility is constant means, say if you have 100 rupee and now you are getting 1 rupee extra, that is why your money income is now 101 rupee. So your increase in utility is 5 unit for one additional uh, one additional extra rupee increase in your money income. So this marginal utility is now 5. If your income is initially 100 rupees, now I am saying that your income is, initial income is say 1 lakh. Okay, number of zeros.
Yes sir.
So now you have 1 lakh in your pocket, and say your say utility is, say for example, I'm for example just 1000 unit. Now you are receiving extra 1 rupee, so your income now will be 1. Number of zeros ठीक हो गया या ज़्यादा हो गया? नहीं, ठीक है. So now your income is 1 lakh and 1 rupees. Now your utility कितना बढ़ेगा? So utility will be now 1005 unit. So there is no difference between your initial income. तो इनिशियल इनकम अगर 100 रुपए है, तब भी अगर तुम्हें 1 रुपए मिले तो तुम्हारा यूटिलिटी और मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी जितना होगा, तुम्हारा इनकम, इनिशियल इनकम अगर 1 लाख रुपये है, तब भी अगर तुम्हें 1 रुपए एक्स्ट्रा मिले, तभी भी तुम्हारा जो मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी है दैट विल बी सेम. ठीक है?
Yes sir.
तो इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? कोई समझ सकता है इसको मतलब और अच्छी तरीके से? What does it mean? What this assumption means?
মানে স্যার মানি মানে টাকা যত বাড়বে ইউটিলিটি তত বাড়বে, মানে মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি।
তুমি কি শুনলে এতক্ষণ ধরে? এতক্ষণ ধরে বলা হলো মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি অফ মানি ইজ কনস্ট্যান্ট, বাড়িয়ে ফেললে কোথা থেকে? So this assumption basically tells us about that the extra 1 rupee, whether it is received by a beggar who had a pocket money of say 100 rupees, or the extra additional 1 rupee received by say a big rich person like Mukesh Ambani. For both of these persons, the additional 1 rupee will give them the same amount of marginal utility. বোঝা গেল? একটা ভিখিরিকে যদি 1 টাকা দেওয়া হয়, তার যতটা মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি হবে, আম্বানিকেও যদি 1 টাকা বেশি দিয়ে দেওয়া হয়, তারও ঠিক ততটাই মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি হবে। Is this okay?
বুঝলাম এবার।
Yes sir.
পরিষ্কার জলের মতো?
Yes sir.
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ।
Next assumption. So this is a restrictive assumption. This assumption is not realistic assumption. So that is why we have another approach of consumer behavior, ordinal approach. We will study it in the next class. Now, in the next assumption is utility function is additive. What does it mean? Say you are consuming say different kinds of commodities or food, services, etc. So if you consume say 5 different kinds of commodities and services, so your total utility will be utility from consumption of commodity A plus utility from consumption of commodity B plus utility from consumption of commodity C and so on. বুঝা গেছে? তুমি বিভিন্ন জিনিস খেয়ে বা পরে যা যা স্যাটিসফ্যাকশন পাবে তো তোমার টোটাল ইউটিলিটি সবগুলোকে যোগ করলে পাওয়া যাবে। ফাইন?
Yes, sir.
Last assumption, diminishing marginal utility. As I said already, that as we keep on consuming more and more amount of the same commodity, the amount of utility we receive from the consecutive units will keep on falling. Say for example, say you went to some marriage party जहाँ पे खाना बिल्कुल फ्री में मिल रहा है और तुम से कोल्ड ड्रिंक्स सबसे ज्यादा पसंद है तो तुम कोल्ड ड्रिंक्स पीना चालू कर दिया. So from the first unit of cold drinks, and assume that now this is a summer month, so from the first unit of cold drink you are getting the highest amount of satisfaction. If this is your marginal utility curve, and for this first unit from the first bottle you are getting this amount of marginal utility. From the next unit, second bottle जब पी रहे हो, then your marginal utility or satisfaction positive है, but it is less than the previous bottle. For the third unit, third bottle, even less utility. So marginal utility is keep on falling. Say after having say 5 bottle के बाद शायद तुम मतलब उल्टी करना स्टार्ट कर दोगे और तुम्हें शायद हॉस्पिटल में एडमिट करना पड़ेगा. So your utility now becomes negative. So after some time, some point of time, if you keep on consuming the commodity, marginal utility of that particular commodity, marginal utility will keep on falling. It reaches zero, and after that, if you keep on consuming hypothetically, then your marginal utility will be negative. Fine?
Yes, sir.
So here again, this total utility will be maximum when marginal utility is equal to 0. So this is the maximum point that total utility curve can reach, and after that, because marginal utility now becomes negative, so this total utility curve will start to fall beyond this line when marginal utility is equal to 0. Okay, now we can see this is the marginal utility of a consumer, and say in the market you had say a given price, market price, you know. So this is the marginal utility curve. This is commodity X. So this is marginal utility of X. And here we are measuring marginal utility and price of the commodity. Say for example, this is the market price. So the consumer knows that the market price is say something P, which is equal to say 5 rupees for a samosa. If this is marginal utility of samosa, say the consumer knows that, mute yourselves, that the consumer knows that this price of samosa is 5 rupees for a samosa. This is the market price of samosa. And the consumer knows that this is my marginal utility curve. Now the question is, what will be the consumer's optimum demand? That means optimum amount of consumption. কনজিউমার যদি জানে যে এটা আমার মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি কার্ভ এন্ড 5 টাকা সিঙ্গাড়ার দাম মার্কেট প্রাইস, তাহলে কনজিউমার বা সেই পার্টিকুলার কনজিউমার কতগুলো সিঙ্গাড়া খাবে? দ্যাট ইজ আওয়ার কোশ্চেন। নাও হাউ উই ক্যান ফাইন্ড out that? So we take the point of intersection between this marginal utility curve and this price line. This is the price line. Okay. So the point of intersection is this point, point E. Now corresponding to this point of intersection, point E, we can say that the consumer will purchase this Q star amount of samosa. Q star can be 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it may be, depending on the shape of this marginal utility curve. So if the consumer knows his or her marginal utility curve and the price line, or that means the market price is known to everybody, and so the consumer can decide what will be the optimum amount of consumption for him or her. বোঝা গেছে ব্যাপারটা?
Yes, sir.
Now I am saying that this point E, this equilibrium will be a stable equilibrium. Why it will be stable equilibrium? Say for example, if the consumer wishes to consume some amount less than his optimum amount, Q star. Say the consumer wants to purchase Q1 amount of the commodity. So if the consumer wants to purchase Q1 amount of the samosa, then what is his marginal utility for consumption of Q1 amount of commodity is this vertical distance from the marginal utility curve. So this is the consumer's marginal utility if the consumer consumes Q1 amount of X. And what is his price? Price is this much, this distance. So for this amount, marginal utility of X is greater than price of X. I'm coming to this point later. Now what is happening at this point? At this point, price of X is equals to marginal utility of X. Okay, so this is the equilibrium condition. Px must be equal to mux, marginal utility of X. Now, what is intuitive explanation of this equation? Can anyone explain it?
Sir, it is means the consumer it is in equilibrium state
Why it will be in equilibrium state?
because we know that what is our maximum total utility, or the means we know that where we are going to be at zero stage, or where we are going to stop, where we are going to satisfy ourselves. The satisfaction point is known to us that at that time we know we have the stability.
Don't make things very complex. Okay, this is very simple thing. Try to understand it very logically and very simply. So don't complicate it. Now take this side, marginal utility of X. Now say if you want to consume one samosa, okay, you are consuming one extra unit of samosa. what is the amount of utility you are getting? MUX, right?
Yes, sir.
Because MUX, marginal utility of X or marginal utility of samosa, is nothing but the amount of satisfaction or amount of utility you are getting from consumption of one additional amount of samosa. Okay, so if you consume one extra samosa, what is your extra amount of utility you are getting? This is nothing but MUX. Fine.
Yes.
Now, when you want to परचेज वन समोसा, समोसा तो फ्री में नहीं बट रहा है, तो दुकान से जब समोसा खरीद रहे हो तो समोसा खरीदने के लिए तुम्हें कितना पैसा देना पड़ रहा है? पीएक्स पैसा देना पड़ रहा है एक यूनिट समोसा के लिए. से फॉर एग्जांपल पीएक्स इज इक्वल टू 5 हियर. ओके, ताई तो?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So to consume one samosa you need to pay px amount of rupees. Okay, now तुम्हारे जेब से अगर 1 रुपए चला जाता है तो तुम्हारा डिससेटिस्फैक्शन कितना होता है? मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ मनी.
Marginal utility of money is constant.
I'm coming to that. So till now we talk about a 1 rupee gain in your pocket. Now we are talking about 1 rupee loss from your pocket. So here marginal utility, or we call it marginal disutility, because we are paying 1 rupee to the seller. So for paying 1 rupee to the seller, how much dissatisfaction we will get is nothing but marginal utility of money or marginal disutility of money. Now, how much amount of money we have paid for one samosa? PX rupees we have paid for one samosa. So how much disutility we are having? PX time MUM. Okay. Now we are assuming that marginal disutility of money is equal to 1. So this will be equal to PX. So in equilibrium, this is the gain in utility from consumption of samosa, and this is the loss in utility from consumption of samosa. So in equilibrium, this gain must be equal to the loss. So that is why this will be the equation for the equilibrium, where the consumer, the gain in utility will be exactly equal to the loss in utility. Is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now look at this point. Say for consumption of Q1, what is happening here? MUX is greater than PX. That means the consumer's gain in utility will be higher than the loss in utility. So the consumer will be better off by consuming more amount of the commodity. So अगर consumer यहाँ पे consumption करे, then still marginal utility is higher than marginal disutility or loss. So the consumer will keep on consuming more amount of the commodity till Q star amount. Now on the other side, take any point here, Q2 amount. For Q2 amount, marginal utility is this much, or the gain is this much. However, loss is this much. So loss is higher than the gain. So the consumer, to maximize his or her net utility, they will reduce the consumption of the commodity. So he will move towards Q star. So point E will be a stable equilibrium. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Now, law of equimarginal utility. Here, just take this term MUX by PX equal to MUM, marginal utility of money. So if you cross multiply it, you can rewrite it. MUX will be equal to marginal utility of money times PX. So here, what we have seen, MUM times PX equal to MUX. Similarly, if there is some other commodity, we can also say that marginal utility of Y, commodity Y, will be equal to price of Y multiplied by marginal utility of money. So again, we can rewrite it MUY by PY will be equal to marginal utility of money. So as marginal utility of money is constant, so if you have more than one commodity, you can write this MUX by PX equal to MUY by PY equal to MUZ by PZ equal to marginal utility of money. So this is called law of equimarginal utility. Now, derivation of demand curve from marginal utility curve. How we can derive the demand curve of the consumer for a commodity from the marginal utility curve. Say, for example, we know the consumer's marginal utility curve. This is the marginal utility curve of the consumer. And what we want to know, we want to find out the consumer's demand function of that commodity. Okay. Now, how we can derive that demand function from marginal utility curve? Say, initially, we take the initial price, market price is equal to P1. So this P1 is the price line, initial price line. So at this point, P1 equal to marginal utility. So this point is now our equilibrium point. So corresponding to that point, we can say that price is this much, P1, this distance, and demand or actual consumption or optimum consumption is this X1, this distance. Fine. So we are getting one point X1, P1. Similarly, if we take some other price, P2, for that, the equilibrium point will be E2, where price line is intersecting with marginal utility curve. So we are getting another point, X2, P2. So corresponding to E2 equilibrium, the optimum demand is this distance, X2, and the price is this distance, P2. Similarly, for E2, you are getting another point, X3, P3. So if you plot these 3 points here, so corresponding to this E1 point, we are plotting this point here, and we are taking here price and quantity demand or optimum demand here in horizontal axis. So by plotting 3 points, E1, E2, and E3, and if we join these 3 points, we are getting the demand curve. So this take any point on this demand curve will give you for any price the consumer's optimum amount of consumption of this commodity. Fine.
Yes, sir.
এরপরে একটু বই দেখে পড়ে নিও, তাহলে আরো বুঝতে সুবিধা হবে। Next thing is consumer surplus. Now, what is consumer surplus? For that, say this is the demand curve. Mute yourselves. So this DD is the demand curve. So a demand curve is nothing but demand curve says the maximum willingness to pay for a consumer. say this is the demand curve. Here we are measuring price and here quantity. So for this amount, say this 1 unit, this vertical distance is nothing but the how much money the consumer is willing to pay for consumption of 1 unit of that commodity. Similarly, for this second unit, consumer is willing to pay this distance. So this much price the consumer is willing to pay for the second unit of the commodity. But the consumer doesn't pay like this. Consumer faces a fixed market price P. Say for samosa, this price is say 5 rupees. This is the market price of samosa. So if we draw the price line like this, so this is the consumer's optimum consumption amount. Say consumers consumes say 4 unit at 5 rupees for each samosa. So consumer is not consuming for the first unit of samosa. He is not paying more than 5 rupees. Say he is not paying say 8 rupees. Or for the second unit of samosa, he is not paying say 7 rupees. You got my point? So for if this is the optimum amount of consumption, say 4 unit the consumer consumes, then for all these 4 units, consumers pays the market price 5 rupees for each samosas. So the consumer is eventually paying this distance, number of samosas, which is this 4 multiplied by this distance, which is price per unit of samosa. So the consumer is actually paying this rectangle, area of this rectangle. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So consumer যদি 4 ইউনিট সিঙ্গাড়া কেনে, মানে 4টে সিঙ্গাড়া কেনে 5 টাকা করে প্রত্যেকটা সিঙ্গাড়া, তাহলে কনজিউমার কতটা দিচ্ছে? এই ডিসটেন্সটা multiplied by this distance. So 5 multiplied by 4, which is 20. So 20 is area of this rectangle, a rectangle. Now the consumer is actually willing to pay up to this amount of samosa. They are willing to pay this distance, the area of this area of this trapezium. So এই এরিয়াটা consumer is actually willing to pay, but consumer is actually paying only this much. So whatever amount is left, so this area is the extra amount that the consumers are willing to pay, but they need not to pay. বোঝা গেল? এই এরিয়াটা is the extra amount যেটা consumer willing to pay, কিন্তু সে বা তাকে পে করতে হচ্ছে না. That is why we call this triangle consumer's surplus. বোঝা গেছে? So this consumer
Yes, sir.
surplus is basically the area under the demand curve and above the price line. Clear? This is the area under the demand curve. This area, এই এরিয়াটা minus the area under the demand curve, price line, এই এরিয়াটা rectangle. সুতরাং যেটা পড়ে থাকলো এই ট্রায়াঙ্গেল, সেটাকেই আমরা বলছি কনজিউমার সারপ্লাস। এই এরিয়াটা, দিস shaded area. Fine?
Yes, sir, বুঝেছি।
Okay.